We are live. It's the Revved Up 906 podcast, a Detroit Pistons podcast, to be exact. And I'm Budson.
And I'm Ryan.
And today, this is a special edition episode. The Revved Up Boys today are going to be predicting the NBA draft's top 10 picks. And there's a lot of trade talk, so we'll possibly get into that also. And tomorrow's the draft, so there is so much to cover. And we've talked about who the Pistons should take with the fifth pick. So make sure to go find that episode. But then also, before we get into our draft picks, this week we just came out with a video Saturday, and we talk about the top free agents the Detroit Pistons can possibly sign. We talk about guys like Kyle Kuzma, Bruce Brown, and guys like that. So make sure to go watch that episode because it's a great watch to kind of give you insight on who we think the Pistons should pick up and what can really boost our roster this season. Ryan, let's talk about the draft.
All right.
The first overall pick, it's kind of obvious, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we're both probably going to pick Victor Wembanyama, but
Yep.
Why this is going to be so interesting, these top 10 picks, is me and Ryan have very different takes on NBA. That's what makes this podcast so brilliant. And so I'm really excited to see who are you taking, with the second pick. The Orlando Magic have that pick. And there's a lot that could go into this, a lot of different positions that they could take. Who do you see the Orlando Magic taking with that second overall pick in this year's draft?
Wait, since when did Orlando have two?
Oh, I'm looking at the wrong thing. The Charlotte Hornets have the second overall pick. Who do you think? Well, actually, this is also just as interesting because the Charlotte Hornets, Michael Jordan's no longer in the front office.
Yep.
They got guys like LaMelo Ball. Who do they're kind of struggling at the big position. They have Richards, but he's not really like a franchise guy. Who do you see the Charlotte Hornets taking with the second overall pick?
Well, you can go Scoot Henderson, but you could also go Brandon Miller. There's a case for both. It depends on if you want to be a small ball kind of lineup or if you want to just take a guy off of what you think he could be. I think Scoot is the for sure safe pick out of the two.
Right.
But Brandon Miller, I think, will be the pick, just given the fact that they don't really have a wing. And outside of Kelly Oubre, I think Kelly Oubre is kind of one of those guys that you could easily ship off. So I think they're going to want wing depth because this league has gone more towards the wing recently, and I don't see why you pass up on potential.
Right, and I agree with that. I think the Charlotte Hornets with the second pick are going to take Brandon Miller. One of my main reasons is they have Terry Rozier, so he can play the two if needed. I mean, he's a true one, but he's like that combo guard, a positionless guard. So I really think they don't need Scoot Henderson. I think Brandon Miller is definitely the guy they should go with because Kelly Oubre is a very movable piece. He's not necessarily a franchise guy. He has moved around quite a bit, a couple teams here in his early career. So I see them taking Brandon Miller. I think he's going to be a guy that really adds a good dynamic to the Charlotte Hornets in the East. Third overall pick. This is something we talked about in our last draft talk episode, and because there's a lot of talk of them being very happy with Asur Thompson and how they worked out with him, posted him on their Instagram. So it seems like he's favorited by the Portland Trailblazers, but who do you see the Trailblazers taking with that third pick?
It really depends on Damian Lillard because there's been trade talks of potentially Damian Lillard and Miami. And so based off that, then you would take Scoot, but you already have Anthony Simons, who is the next up and coming point guard in the league. And then you also have Shadon Sharp, who can play the guard. So I don't know if you necessarily touch that position. But then it's like, who do you go after next? And they've worked out the Thompson brothers. They've worked out Cam Whitmore. They've worked out a couple different guys. If not Scoot, they're going to take one of the Thompson brothers. And I see that being Amon, just in the fact that he can play a two, where Shadon Sharp could easily get moved to the three, that's his primary position. So Shadon Sharp at the three, and then Amon Thompson at the two. or yeah, Amon Townsend at the 2, and then
Right.
maybe obviously Anthony Simons at the 1. So I don't know. It's either one of the Thompson brothers, if not Scoot.
Yeah, every year there's a pick where it shocks the world. I think this is a hot take, but I think the Portland Trailblazers are going to take Cam Whitmore at the 3. I think that the trade or the move of Damian Lillard to the Miami Heat, I think it's going to happen. It's due time. It should have happened 4 years ago. I think, it's been a lot of talk every offseason since he was in his fifth or sixth this season. I think it's finally going to happen. I think he's going to go chase the championship with the Miami Heat. Whether they get it or not remains to be seen. But I think they're going to shock the world and get Cam Whitmore, because every once in a while there's a draft pick that just kind of like, whoa, that's a move and a half. And it usually doesn't work out. But I see them maybe just kind of shocking the world. With the 4th pick, the hated Houston Rockets are 1 pick ahead of the Detroit Pistons. Obviously, with what we're going off of, you didn't confirm Scoot's gone by now. From what we're talking about, Scoot might be available at this 4th pick. What are you thinking for the Houston Rockets at 4?
Well, see, it goes back to the Trailblazers there, because Scoot is undeniably good. He's a for sure safe pick no matter what. But you also look at what Houston's working with right now in the guard position. They drafted Jalen Green. They traded for Kevin Porter Jr. That's their 1-2 punch right now. So it would just be a little, I don't necessarily know what they would do with that pick other than being safe and taking Scoot, but I think they're a wing needy team, just like we are. And so then if not Cam Whitmore not being available, Scoot's there, I would see one of the Thompson brothers potentially going there, because either one of them is a for sure top 4 pick, most likely. And honestly, they could go anywhere. They could go anywhere in the draft, but that's just given how deep this year's draft is compared to most years. And so I see one of the Thompson brothers at 4.
So with me, I don't hate that. I think the Thompson brothers are highly likely to go at that pick. But for me, they're just too similar to like a Jalen Green-esque player, Kevin Porter Jr.-esque player. So I think the Thompson brothers and Scoot are gonna drop drastic. I don't think they're gonna go where they were expected. I think with the 4th pick, the Houston Rockets are gonna surprise us and take Nick Smith Jr. I think he really matches with the kind of personalities that the Houston Rockets are going with. They're kind of going with those villain-esque players, Jalen Green, Kevin Porter Jr., Kenyon Martin Jr., Jabari Smith, all these guys that are kind of big personalities, like to get in your face, like to give you buckets. I think Nick Smith Jr. is going to really mix with that morale that the Houston Rockets have built. And I think they're going to surprise us. But, I mean, now that I'm thinking about it, it's like, how likely, now we're going to be talking about the 5th pick, the Detroit Pistons pick. Now, we're talking about the Thompson brothers were probably taken with the 4th. Hypothetically, with what we're talking about now, Scoot may or may not be available. One of the Thompson brothers might be available. One of the most likely guys the Pistons were to take was Cam Whitmore, but now he's off the board. What are you thinking with the 5th pick for the Detroit Pistons?
Well, as we would say, it's been obvious this entire time, and that would be Taylor Hendricks. He's the guy, honestly. You look at his tape, you look at what he's been able to do as a freshman. Granted, the conference he plays in isn't like a top-notch conference in college basketball, but it's good enough when you have teams like Memphis and Houston, which were nationally ranked this past year, and he had to deal with them. And then how he played against Houston, stopping Jarris Walker, who a lot of people are mocking to the Pistons. Just how he's played against certain guys, it's like, wow, okay, this guy is raw and has a very high ceiling. But there's a case to be made that anybody you bring in, like Taylor Hendricks, can easily sit back on the bench and be in rotation for a little bit before making that jump. Because it's not like he's a top 3 pick. He's pick number 5. So
Right.
he can develop a little bit and sit back and watch and then grow into that role rather than getting shoved in. But I think either way, I think he's fine. And that's our guy.
So I like that. I think Taylor Hendricks is likely. But I've been seeing a lot of talk of Jarris Walker. And when we look at the drafts since 2020, we have been so happy with pretty much every pick. We've been like, oh, that's a great pick. Or when we got Isaiah Livers in the second round 2 seasons ago, we're like, oh, we love it. We're thrilled with Isaiah Stewart, Sadiq Bey, even Killian Hayes, we were a little uneasy about. Cade, we were ecstatic about. There are so many years. I've been alive 22 years. 19 of those years, I was disappointed with who the Pistons drafted. I think this year is going to be the year where Troy Weaver has been so distracted with recruiting Monty Williams in the practice facility with the players. I think this is going to be the year where we're like, what just happened? Why did we take that guy at 5? We were already disappointed with the draft lottery. I think it's going to continue. There's only so many wins and so many losses that a team can take in an offseason. And I think the Pistons are going to take Jarris Walker at 5. I'm not happy about it. I don't love it. I just, in my head, I'm expecting the worst after watching the draft lottery and seeing us slip to 5. I just think the draft this year is just going to be brutal for us. I'm more excited for the 31st pick than I am with this 5th pick because there's so many guys where you're just like, what is Troy Weaver going to do? I would be ecstatic if they took Taylor Hendricks. But unfortunately, I think there's been too much good that's happened to the Pistons organization, and we're going to get Jarris Walker. What are your thoughts on that there, Ryan?
Well, I can't stand him, but I
Yeah,
think you'd be surprised because I think Jarris Walker could be available at pick 15.
I wouldn't
So
be shocked.
so honestly, here's how I think this will happen. I think we could end up with Jarris Walker still, even after drafting Taylor Hendricks. And that's because of the 10th overall pick. Because we've
Yeah,
been talking about sending Bojan to Dallas for the 10th pick and Tim Hardaway Jr. That's been the talks recently, which I
right.
don't mind that at all. I love Tim Hardaway Jr. He could add a lot of value to our team, obviously. And then the fact that you would have 10 available. I mean, obviously, if Jarris Walker is at 10, I'm drafting him. Even though I'm not a huge fan of him, as long as I think we can get Taylor Hendricks, either way, I think Taylor Hendricks could go at 5 or go to 10. And same with
Yeah,
Jarris Walker. So
right.
I think I can see an option where we draft both and it's a win-win for a lot of Pistons fans. There's not really a lose-lose, other than Jarris Walker is pretty much kind of similar to Isaiah Stewart and Marvin Bagley in a sense, not exact players. So people don't call me out saying that Jarris Walker is nothing like Isaiah Stewart and Marvin Bagley. They're similar. That's all I'm
Yeah,
saying.
they are.
But I see a possibility where we end up with both of them.
Okay, let's talk about the 10th pick. Yes, there's a possibility of Bojan Bogdanovic getting traded to Dallas, us picking up Tim Hardaway and that 10th pick. I don't know who we could take at that 10th pick. I agree with you. Jarris Walker would be a great option if we have Taylor Hendricks at 5. If we get Jarris at 5, we can get Taylor Hendricks at 10. I love that. But I know who I don't want at the 10th pick. I don't want Dylan Mitchell out of Texas. No, thank you. I don't want Derek Whitehead out of Duke. No, thank you. I don't want any guards. Leave it alone. Leave it alone. I don't want guards. Leave it alone. I would like Anthony Black. Say, Jarris Walker's gone at 8, 9, whatever, and we get Taylor Hendricks at 5. I think go after an Anthony Black because he's a very Taylor Hendricks-esque player. He's bigger in size. He's got that shooting ability. I really want a Sadiq Bey-esque player, but him to work out. I
Okay.
like what Sadiq added to the Pistons. I just don't think it was the right timing. I think Cade wasn't ready to have a guy like that yet. I don't think Jaden Ivey was able to complement him yet. But I think with a year under Jaden Ivey's belt and some development in his second season, Cade Cunningham coming into really his second season, getting some momentum under his belt, I think a little bit farther down the line, a guy like Anthony Black, a Sadiq Bey-esque player, will work out. So I won't mind taking him at 10. because I think he's a little bit like Taylor Hendricks, but maybe not as offensively sound as a Taylor Hendricks is. I think Taylor's a little bit better at getting the shot by himself a little bit more than Anthony Black is. I think Anthony taking some time to I don't think he'll have time in the G League. The 10th pick doesn't typically spend too much time in the G
Yeah.
League. But I think if we lose a guy like Bojan, we lose Isaiah Livers per se. We lose a couple of these other guys. I think if you add in an Anthony Black, he might be able to be a little bit more efficient than an Isaiah Livers.
I will say, I'm not a huge fan of Anthony Black, but I can understand the talent and value that you could get out of him.
Mm-hmm.
I think if Jarris Walker's off the board at 10, I think you go for a guy like Grady Dick, because
Yeah.
he will add in instant shooting. He's a playmaker, and just having one of those guys coming off the bench and being like a Boban Marjanovic, not Boban Marjanovic, Boban,
Bogdan.
yeah, Bogdanovic.
Bogdan. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
I think a player like him would be crucial for our team going forward.
Yeah.
Kevin, even like a Kevin Herter, that's who this is.
Mm-hmm.
He's that kind of player where he doesn't need to be the guy. He's just one of those key role players that you're gonna bring in when you need a shooter on the floor, kind of like a Duncan Robinson. That's how I see Grady Dick. I see him being one of those key shooting role players that we need in late game situations. And I think him I think he would actually benefit our roster as a whole, just because he obviously is worth the 10th overall pick.
Yeah.
He's not going to be anything extremely extraordinary, but he's going to be just a special, unique key role player, and we need key role players.
Yeah, I really like Grady Dick's game. That's a great point. I think that he's a you're kind of talking about comparison. I also kind of think he's like a Tyler Hero,
Yeah,
just with a little bit more length to him. I think having that as a sixth man on the offensive threats we already have to have him complement them, dude, that sounds
yeah.
beautiful to me. So I completely agree. I think I would not hate having Grady Dick at 10. I would not be disappointed at all. So we talked about the possibilities of what draft picks the Pistons might have with the 10th pick. We talked about the 5th pick. Let's finish off these 10 picks. Let's get into the Orlando Magic with the 6th overall pick. Who do you see them taking after some of the guys that have already been taken?
Well, so based off our perspective, Scoot would be available, and I see Scoot being that pick.
Mm-hmm.
I think he's the perfect pick for them. And given how we think the draft is going to go thus far, I think obviously having a guy who should have probably gone in the top three available at 6, I think there's no way you pass on a guy like that. In
Right.
Orlando, even though they are guard heavy, Scoot would be better than majority of them right away, off the bat. And he would
Mm-hmm.
actually help them progress into getting out of a rebuild, which they have been a rebuild for forever now. And I
Right.
think just the tandem of Franz Wagner, along with a Scoot Henderson and Paulo Banchero, I think that would be a for sure fit.
Yeah, and we already talked about the possibility. I think it was in private. We were golfing one day. You were talking about the possibility of the Orlando Magic even trading up a guy like trading away Jalen Suggs to hopefully move up for a guy like Scoot Henderson. So yeah, I think if he's available at 6, which I think it's likely, I
Yeah.
don't think that it's out of the question. I think they would definitely take him. I think he'd be a great guy to add to that roster because they're already such an energetic team. They bring that heat. They make sure that you feel the force. So I think that adding a guy like Scoot with his athletic ability, and I think that's a great compliment to that roster. The 7th pick, the Indiana Pacers have that. The Pistons played this team 4 times a year. We're very familiar with the Indiana Pacers. They got guys like Chris Duarte, Tyrese Halliburton. They still have Miles Turner? Or did he
Yep,
get
they
traded
do.
away?
They
Yeah, so
still
they
have him.
still got Miles Turner. After thinking about some of the roster pieces they already have, what guys do you think might complement their roster?
I think they'd go with like an Asur Thompson,
Yeah.
because even though you have Benedict Matrin at the wing already, Asur is one of those guys that can play the two. He can play the one. He's a positionless player essentially, and I think you throw a Stuart Thompson at the 2, have Tyrese at the 1, obviously Benedict Mathurin at the 3, and then Miles Turner at the 5, and then whoever else at the 4. I think that's
Right.
what they roll with. I think he's the for sure pick there because he is one of the top tier players in this draft. I don't think you can go wrong with him, and I think he'd be in a perfect situation there in Indiana.
Yeah, I think if the Pistons don't pick up Anthony Black, I think it's kind of unlikely. I like his game, but I could see the Pacers picking up him or a Stuart Thompson. I think it's most probable that they'll probably get a Stuart Thompson. With the seventh, I'm looking at the wrong draft again. With the eighth pick, the Washington Wizards, um, they have a lot of new guys to the roster. Recently, just lost Bradley Beal. I'm drawing a blank on who they brought in from that trade. They'll be able to help out with that. But guys like Corey Kispert and a lot of complimentary guys there. Who did they get in that trade?
So they got Chris Paul, obviously, and then they got Landry Shamet. And so they get a good bench player in Landry. Chris Paul, obviously one of the best point guards in NBA history.
Yeah.
But the word is Chris Paul is either going to get traded or they are going to buy him out. So they're not keeping him. There's a very limited chance that they even keep him. And then Kristaps Porzingis has a player option worth $36 million. And so I don't see a world in which Kristaps Porzingis turns that money down because there's no way he makes $36 million on the open market. I think he
Right.
signs the player option and stays. So it's an interesting dynamic given their current roster because there's not a lot of good pieces. So given that, let's say Kristaps resigns, Chris Paul's not there, but they have Landry Shamet. I see them going after Jarris Walker. I think he would be that pick, just given the fact that he's a kind of one of those guys that you could see getting taken at 5. You can see him going from 5 to 15, but he is a for sure talent. He has talent written all over him. He just needs to be in a certain fit for him to excel. I think Washington is just gonna try and draft him because he's the best available. And then on top of that, it's like, why pass up on a guy like that when you don't even know if the next guy is going to be a for sure talent?
I see the Wizards actually going a different way. They got guys like Kendrick Nunn, Corey Kispert, like I mentioned before. What are some of their other guys? Johnny Davis, Denny Advia. So it's like they got a couple guards, but they really don't have like the superior guy because if they lose Chris Paul, like it's seeming to happen, I think they're going to go with a guard. I think they might go with Derek Whitehead. I don't think that he's going to pan out, but the Wizards always seem to pick out these guys that are like kind of boring.
Yeah,
Like
that's
they
true.
got Corey Kispert in the previous year. Isaiah Todd was one of the centers they picked up that was very highly touted, but like mediocre, playing G League now. So I think they're going to try to go after a guard because if I'm their front office, I'm like, who's going to be running this offense? Because
Yeah.
Johnny Davis is not a pass first point guard. It's not
Nope.
really a true point guard. He's really a 2. And Denny Advia, he's like a small forward now. That's what he's turned into in the NBA. And I just don't. Kendrick Nunn, really, is that who you want at your starting point guard in the NBA? I don't think so. So I think they're probably going to go with Derek Whitehead at with that pick. I think that's most probable. Number 9, Utah Jazz. A lot going on with Utah
Yeah.
Jazz. I mean, this is complicated. I don't know a whole lot about the Jazz, but Lauri Markkanen, obviously their key player right now. What kind of player do you think you see the Utah Jazz taking at number 9?
It's all over the place. They could go just about anywhere.
Yeah,
Um, I mean, Jordan Clarkson obviously is still one of the better players in that organization and in the league. Obviously, Lauri Markkanen is one of the best power forwards in the NBA right now.
yeah,
They nailed the Walker Kessler pick.
yeah.
He's a stud. They don't really have a point guard, and they are lacking at the wing. So it's either a point guard or a small forward. I see them drafting, and I can kind of see like a Keontae George possibly going there. just because he's one of those guys that can for sure score, and he can play the point guard. He can play the small forward. He's a 1-2-3 kind of player, and I think you can't pass up on the offensive ability that a guy like Keontae George has.
Yeah, I think they really need one of those two-way players that can like play the shooting guard position, but also be a stretch three. I think they might go with Dylan Mitchell out of Texas. He adds, a solid defensive mentality to with guys like Walker Kessler, Laurie Markkinen, and Jordan Clarkson already so offensive focused. I think that they could really use a guy like Dylan Mitchell that can give you a little bit of both. With the 10th pick, before we wrap up today's episode, we talked about how the Pistons could possibly end up with this pick from the Dallas Mavericks. But as of right now, not set in stone, the Dallas Mavericks have that 10th pick. Who do you see the Dallas Mavericks picking up this in this draft to kind of complement guys like Luka Doncic?
Well, I see them going big. I don't think personally I'd go Taylor Hendricks for the Pistons at 5. Let's say Jarris Walker is off the board. I would go with Derek Lively out of Duke. They have Miles Powell, who is one of the better mid-tier centers in the NBA, but outside of him, they really don't have anybody there. I mean, they have Davis Bertans, which he is a shooter, but he's not proven to be anything special. And they really need depth there at the center power forward position. So I think Derek Lively, who can shoot, who can put the ball on the floor, is a freak of an athlete. I think you kind of have to go for a Duke kind of player because they need help in the big department.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. I agree. I think Lively will get picked at 10. But I just want to point out the centers for this year's draft is like slim pickings, people. Like, if you're a team that needs a center, don't use the draft. Just go in free agency or make a trade. Like, I mean, the drafts this year are terrible. I can hardly pronounce any of their names. And it's always like guys from Western Kentucky or Europe for centers this year. It's like crazy. So good luck, Dallas, if you have this pick and need a center, because you're probably not going to get a great center from this year's draft unless you're Victor Wembanyama.
Yeah, that's true.
That will do it for today's episode, our special edition, the top 10 draft picks and our predictions. Just so you guys know, this Saturday is a new episode coming out, and this week we talk about the four most I put up 3. The 4 most important things for our coaching staff to address at this year's training camp and this season. The 4 things that Monty Williams and his coaching staff have to address with our guys so that we can have a more productive upcoming season. So we are looking forward to bringing you that episode. Make sure to like and subscribe and press that share button. We appreciate you guys watching. We will see you guys in the next episode. Peace.